I'm Lindsay Valenti.
And I'm Madison Stengel.
And we're the hosts of Ye Old Crime, where we discuss the funny,
hey man, he's a nice guy. And they're like, no, he's disgusting. He has hooves.
Strange. There are EVPs of spirits saying, get out, in a room where patients committed suicide, and obscure crimes of yesteryear.
Here, Justin, here's your first phallic amulet.
Join us Wednesdays, wherever you listen to podcasts, and we'll see you next time with another tale
as old as crime.
Hey everybody, welcome to True Crime Freaks, my new podcast. I want to tell you about the different ways you can support this podcast. One is you can go to my other podcast, Lights Camera Pro, where I interview TV and film professionals about their careers. And I also do movie reviews and TV show reviews. You can check out one of my online courses. I've got an Adobe Premiere Basics course and a Secrets of How to Start a Podcast course. Those are at thinkific.com. Just search them when you go there. We also have a merch store. Just search the podcast at teespring.com and check out our hoodies, t-shirts, and mugs. I also have a children's book called Feldman Runs Away, which is on Amazon.com. You can always support the podcast by going to Apple or Spotify, wherever you listen, subscribe, rate, and review. This podcast does have graphic content. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Thanks, everybody. They said he was a genius. They said the classes would change your life. Little did the students know, some would be branded for 45 minutes on a table, and some would become lifelong sex slaves with a written commitment to only have sex with the leader, who they called Vanguard. This is the story of the Nexium Sex Cult. Her name was Sarah Edmondson. She was from Vancouver, Canada, and she blew this entire sex cult open. Okay, so welcome everybody to True Crime Freaks, you freaks. Let's get into another chilling episode. It was a secret sex cult. There was a federal indictment. Her picture was in the New York Times, and it had a picture of her holding down her pants so you could see right above her groin that there was a brand there, that she had been branded by someone in the cult. And we'll hear that story from Sarah later. Keith Renery, the founder of Nexium, is accused of coercing women into being sex slaves. He's now facing federal charges, including sex trafficking. Sarah says that they were all pawns in his slick, perverted fantasy, especially women. Mark Vicente introduced Sarah to Nexium. They met on a cruise ship. He was working on a film festival. They talked all night. They clicked right away. And he told her about this group in upstate New York, which was really changing things. They had these courses, and there are all these different levels, and how you could change your life and become a better person, a more authentic person. And she was interested. She wanted to hear more about it, so they talked for days. He eventually convinced her to join Nexium. She put down a $2,000 deposit, and she took her first class. Sarah talked about her first time at Nexium, her first class. It was 5 days. It was 5 14-hour days. And she talked about her experience on the A&E show Cults and Extreme Belief. It was a documentary about Nexium. So she said that, she was very skeptical at first, but she went into this class and it was all young, beautiful people. They seemed very smart. They seemed very successful in their careers. And she was already successful in her career, but she wanted to know more. And they told her, they said, listen, you're going to get a feeling that you want to bolt, that you want to leave this class, this session, and that's okay. That's normal and that's supposed to happen. What we would like you to do is to stay. So after 3 days, 3 long 14-hour days in this class, there was 5 days total. Sarah was sold. She wanted to join Nexium. She wanted to be part of this. And she went on to be very successful. And she recruited a lot of people. She started running her own classes. And eventually she met her husband, Anthony Ames, in Nexium. And they got married. And they were married by a woman named Lauren. And Lauren was very high up in the chain. And you have to realize that Sarah hasn't met the leader of Nexium. His name is Vanguard. His real name in real life is called Keith Renery. And he's a very unassuming guy. He's average height, average build. He has hair parted in the middle. Sometimes he has a beard, sometimes he doesn't. But he wears these sort of wireframe circular glasses. He looks like a dork. He comes from a background in math and engineering and IT. And he's supposed to be a genius, supposed to have like one of the highest IQs of anyone. You find out later that that isn't true. But Mark Vicente, who got her into the cult, we're going to call it the cult because that's what it is, he explained how people were taken by him. Because, you know, Elizabeth Vargas is interviewing her. There's this sort of cult therapist there, and she's talking about how people get seduced into cults. And it's very easy for all of us, because I've done it, to say, oh, well, I would never go into a cult. I'm too smart for that, or I've never been that vulnerable or that scared or that alone. And they do prey on vulnerable people. But in this case, they're preying on a lot of successful, young, good-looking, smart people. So they had to really trick them and really make them believe in this stuff. And I told the story. I was on Clubhouse. I don't know how many of you know about Clubhouse, but it's this platform. It's kind of like talk radio, and you bring people up on stage, which is kind of like, okay, we're going to go to this caller, the old days of Howard Stern. And so you bring these people up on stage, and we were talking about Nexium this past weekend. And I was telling this story about how I was living in San Francisco, and I was 20 years old or 19 years old. I just moved there after college, and I was working in a store, and this beautiful blonde woman came in. I was single. I was not dating anybody. Had only been there a few months. And she was like, hey, just so you know, we're having a retreat this weekend and you should come. And she gave me a flyer. And I was like, okay, maybe I'll check it out. And she was like, oh, by the way, I like your hair. So I like your shirt. I don't remember what she said, some sort of compliment. And I was like, oh, I think that girl likes me. So I was like, maybe I'll check this out. But the woman next to me at the cash register told me, she was like, listen, do you know that that's a Moonie? And I was like, no, what's a Moonie? So she explained to me that the Moonies had mass weddings, and they owned Bumblebee Tuna, and they were a cult, and they got everybody to travel around the country and sell products for them and make products that they sold and all this crazy stuff. And I was like, wow, I don't want any part of that. So I am going to say no to the retreat. And luckily I had somebody there to tell me, because honestly, I probably would have went. And, you know, Sarah is a little bit older. She's 28 years old, but she meets this really smart guy, Mark, who's really creative, and she trusts him. And then eventually she's in it with her husband, and they're both thinking this is great and we're all going to do well. Sarah she sort of excelled at the recruiting, and she excelled at the classes. So she just kept moving up and moving up and moving up. And she was like, well, maybe I'll do this for my life. And eventually she did meet Keith, and she met him very briefly and went to an event and met him, and he said, thank you. And that was just kind of it. But you have to realize that they build him up. He's met with the Dalai Lama. He's had this woman, Allison Mack, who's on a famous TV show, be part of the cult. And they keep selling it as this is a really good thing. He's helping people. He's totally harmless. And they were talking about his body gestures a little bit, how, he's always using his hands and pushing out his hands to say, I'm harmless. I can help you. I'm nice. I'm comforting, like all of these sort of things. So what someone did tell me in this Clubhouse this weekend, I'm learning a lot from Clubhouse, that this kind of stuff takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't even happen over a bunch of days. It happens over years. And slowly you believe what's happening. And Mark Vicente, who introduced Sarah to Nexium, and her husband were at a table, and they're looking at pictures of a bunch of friends together and said who's left and who's stayed. And then they saw a picture of Keith teaching a class. And at the time, Mark said, I can't believe that when I was there, I thought this guy knew everything about life and he had all the answers, and all I had to do is just learn from him. And now I know that he was a liar and a thief, and just lied to everybody, and none of it was real. And it's really sad. And that is sad because this guy is preying on people like so many others before him. We've seen the other cults and what they do to people. And it's really, this therapist on the A&E special documentary kept talking about everything's about compliance, and everything is about getting people to do what you want. And Scientology, we've seen documentaries about that. So it's very similar. It's a tactic that people use, and they do it over time. But what was really crazy about this, and sort of took it to the next level and was even creepier and sicker, was that Keith would have this woman, Lauren, who was at Anthony and Sarah's wedding, who she considered a friend and a confidant. She recruited her to go to the next level. And what that meant is that she was going to have to give herself up to a master-slave relationship. And she was like, it isn't really a master-slave relationship, but you want to, you get a tattoo and you say that, you're committed to the person above you and you will do whatever they say. And she's like, I really don't want to do that. And she's like, okay. And then she comes back and they go back and forth, and she just gives her little tidbits, Lauren, to make her think like, okay, we are going to do this thing where we get these tattoos and it's going to be great. And you're going to move to the next level and you're going to make more money and you're going to be higher up in the organization. I just need you to commit to it. And finally, Sarah comes back and she says, okay, what do I need to do? Well, what you need to do is give me collateral. And Sarah explains in the documentary that collateral is things that will stop you from pulling out or stopping from your commitments. So they're set in place so that you won't renege on your commitments. So she explained that, in a lower, it happens all through Nexium. In a lower level, it's like, okay, if I don't go to the gym, I can't have any dessert for a week. If I don't go to the gym, I can't do anything fun, like go out to the movies. Then it gets more and more serious. Like if I don't go to a gym for 2 weeks, I have to sleep on the floor. If I don't go to a gym for 3 weeks, I have to sleep, in the cold basement. Or like they just keep giving you these things that make you keep your commitments and keep your word. So it's not a foreign idea to her that you'd have to do something bad or terrible if you break your commitments. Lauren tells her she needs a naked picture of her, which is crazy, and I can't imagine anyone ever saying yes to. Lauren tells her that she has to record a video talking badly about all her parents and her family, and then she also Sarah gives her some information about some indiscretions she had earlier in life, and she didn't say what those were, but she had them written down and gave them to her. Now she has all this stuff that Sarah is also an actress, and she has another business, and she just doesn't want this stuff to ever come out to the world. It would be so embarrassing. So she has this against her, and she's told her she's getting a tattoo. And we're going to talk about what that is. It's not really a tattoo. It's something else much more despicable. Okay, so I'm going to talk about this next part of being branded, and it's pretty disturbing, so you just have to decide if you want to listen or not. it's a pretty disturbing thing what they do to these women. So Lauren, who is higher up than her in the Nexium organization, the cult, says they're going to go to Allison Mack's house and have a session where they get these tattoos. So they all go to the house. Alison Mack is this woman who's on a TV show on the CW. It's kind of a famous show. I don't know if it was Smallville or something like that. I don't remember exactly the show, but people know who she is, so they trust her. She has this beautiful townhouse in New York, and they go there, and there's like 7 women, and they all think they're getting tattoos, and they're having alcohol, and they're talking about it. And finally, the first woman gets up on the table. They go to this room, this guest room, and there's a table, like a medical table, and she gets up on the table, and this woman brings out a cauterizing iron. And you think, Sarah explains that you think of getting branded, like taking a brand for a cow, like a metal thing that you heat up and just go on someone's skin, but this is right above your groin, and it's at a very sensitive area, and they are literally carving these initials into the symbol into your body. And they're doing it with this iron, which kind of just cuts open your skin, and then it cauterizes after that. So you've got this sort of open wound that they keep making to make this symbol. It's a very intricate symbol. So she's sitting there saying, you told me I was going to do a tattoo. I'm not going to do this. And she's like, you have to do this. This is part of going to the next level, and blah, blah, blah. And it's so crazy. And all these women are doing it. And she goes on and on for a while talking about how she convinced herself to do this. And they were all naked. They could have went running out into the street and flagged somebody down. But really what Sarah and all the other women were worried about, the 6 or 7 other women that were there, is that they were going to release their collateral. So they were going to show their naked pictures online. They were going to show their damning evidence of indiscretions, and show these videos where they say they hate their family or hate their loved ones or whatever. So that's really what stopped her from running. And she's like, you can do this. And she said it was the most painful thing of her life. It took 45 minutes. It hurt so much. And everybody was screaming. And she just, all the women had to hold them down. And she just stayed completely still and had tears running down her face. And Lauren had tears running down her face. And she said, you're doing so well. This is so crazy. This is so insane to think that people would do this to each other. But when you're deep into a cult, you'll do whatever the leader says. And these people had been in this cult for years, and there was just no alternative. So Sarah talks about holding a phone. And while someone else was getting branded, she was holding Lauren's phone. And this is a really key piece of evidence in this case, is that she saw a text, and it said from KR, Keith Renery, who's the leader, who obviously would be checking in. And he checked in and he said, how is everybody doing with the ritual? How is everybody doing with this ritual? And Lauren didn't answer, but she saw the text go by on the phone to prove that Keith knew about it and that he was part of it because he set it up. And then we get into more disturbing allegations, which, is the next round. Once she kind of finds out about what's coming next, is that she heard rumors, and it turned out to be true, that some of the women in the cult, especially the ones that go to the higher level, had made a written agreement with Keith to only sleep with Keith, but Keith could sleep with many women. And this was something they taught in one of their spin-off classes. There's one called DOS, there was another one, but it was that women are seen as weak and men are seen as strong, and men can have multiple partners and women can only have one partner. And if you want to change that, you have to do what I say. So this is him taking advantage of people, saying, we're going to change things, but you have to do what I say. Basically, sleep with me. So she was totally freaked out. She went home, Sarah. She called Mark, actually, not her husband first. and said, "This is what happened to me. This is insane. I don't know what to do." And Mark was like, "Oh my God, that's so horrific. I can't believe this is happening. And I can't believe these other women are sleeping with him." And so Mark investigated it. He said he was leaving the cult, and he said that she should too. And then she told her husband, he said, "We're definitely leaving Nexium." And Mark researched it and found out that he thought maybe it was a few women. It was 20 or 30 or more women that Keith was sleeping with at the higher level. So what happened next? What happened next is they all left. They did a lot of research, and they went to the New York Times, and Sarah Edmondson became a whistleblower for Nexium. And I'm not sure how her husband was involved or how Mark was involved, if they were interviewed also, but they definitely all left. And what happened is that Keith, this was in the New York Times, and people saw it all over the world, and Keith just came out and denied it. So Sarah still had people on the inside that she had recruited. And one of the women, she found out later, this is a long story, but Mark had seen these videos of a beheading in the Middle East. And basically Keith took that months later and brought all these women on a retreat and made them watch the beheading. And, kind of just to sort of break them down. And the women were horrified by watching these beheadings of different women in this video, I believe also men. And it was just another sick thing that they did to people to sort of control them and get them to comply. It was to make them watch, they called them snuff films. It wasn't just the beheading video, it was a bunch of videos, and they hooked up this thing with all these wires on her head and the thing to her finger. And they were checking how they reacted to these videos. And they were probably trying to see who was the most vulnerable, or who was the person who was going to be the hardest to break. So maybe the least vulnerable. So all of it is just so messed up that actually people would sit around and think about this crap and how to manipulate people and get them to have sex with you and the guy's making millions of dollars because it's this pyramid scheme where everybody goes out and works for him and makes these classes, and he just gets most of the money. So it's absolutely insane. Sarah feels very, very guilty for recruiting. She recruited up to 2,000 people. And it's just a horrible story. So at this point, Nexium is on pause, and it may even destroy the entire cult. I can't imagine people still staying with them. The therapist, the cult therapist who was on the A&E documentary, did say that if anybody stays now after this and they know what's happening, then they're never going to leave, and they're going to be in this thing for life. Okay, so I did check an update on the sentencing of Keith Renery and Allison Mack. And Allison Mack was on the show Smallville. Keith Renery, co-founder and Vanguard and leader of Nexium, was convicted in June 2019 of multiple charges, including sex trafficking, forced labor, and wire fraud, as well as racketeering. He possessed child pornography, child exploitation, identity theft, money laundering. He was sentenced on October 27th, 2019 to 120 years in prison. That is so awesome. I mean, obviously he's going to be in prison until he dies. I don't think he could do the death penalty because he didn't murder anyone. But it's so fantastic. Just put the guy away forever. He was such a horrible, horrible human being, such a selfish bastard. So that is fantastic that he's sentenced to 120 years in prison. Alison Mack, on the other hand, she was arrested in 2018. She pleaded guilty to racketeering, conspiracy, forced labor, racketeering acts. She's awaiting sentencing. She hasn't gotten sentenced yet, but she could get a maximum of 40 years in prison. Lauren Saltzman, the woman who brought Sarah to the branding, She's pleaded guilty to conspiracy charges, but they haven't sentenced her either. So Keith, 120 years, Allison, maybe up to 40, Lauren, nothing yet, but these people are being stopped, and I'm sure that Nexium is shutting down. So this is a good thing when these stories don't always end well. And this woman, Sarah Edmondson, thank God for her and her friend Mark and her husband, because they just stood up. It's hard to stand up to a cult. And they went to the New York Times and they turned this thing upside down. And now these people are being arrested, and they stopped them. They stopped them from doing it to other people, taking advantage of other people. So that's great. I love it. It's great news. And everybody, thanks so much for listening. Have a great day. Bye-bye. And if you want to add any comments on social media about what you think about cults in general or about Nexium, I'd love to hear the feedback. It was great talking to people about it in the clubhouse and getting feedback. So let me know what you think, or whatever you think about the podcast in general. Subscribe, rate, and review, and I will see you guys next time in the next chilling episode of True Crime Freaks. Thanks, everybody. Have a good day. Bye-bye. Hey, everybody. Welcome to True Crime Freaks, my new podcast. I want to tell you about the different ways you can support this podcast. One is you can go to my other podcast, Lights Camera Pro, where I interview TV and film professionals about their careers. And I also do movie reviews and TV show reviews. You can check out one of my online courses. I've got an Adobe Premiere Basics course and a Secrets of How to Start a Podcast course. Those are at thinkific.com. Just search them when you go there. We also have a merch store. Just search the podcast at teespring.com and check out our hoodies, t-shirts, and mugs. I also have a children's book called Feldman Runs Away, which is on Amazon.com. You can always support the podcast by going to Apple or Spotify, wherever you listen. Subscribe, rate, and review. This podcast does have graphic content. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Thanks, everybody. Thanks to Joseph McDade for the music. I will see you next time in the next chilling story on True Crime Freaks. Thanks for listening, everybody. Have a great day. I'm Sean Ventura. Take care.